Welcome to the latest edition of the Impact Room, where today I'll be speaking with Dr. Steve Long, ex-CEO for the USA at Many Pets. Welcome along, Steve.
Well, John, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, sir. How are you?
Very well on this one, yet another wet day in England.
Yeah, it's becoming something a bit like Groundhog Day, same weather every day until the end of time. So it feels anyway. But yeah, it wouldn't be Great Britain without the rain, that's for sure. But no, I appreciate you coming on today, Steve. So thanks a lot for your time. So today we're going to explore a few sort of topics in particular where you've got a hell of a lot of experience, such as expansion into new and exciting territories across the globe, and also a little piece on sort of advice that you can, or guidance that you can give to particular organizations or even professionals as well who are looking to sort of do that kind of thing. So that will be the topics of today. So first of all, Steve, let's go into it with a little bit of a lighter question. What would be your elevator pitch, Steve?
So my elevator pitch, so experienced CEO and C-suite executive, very successful track record, mainly in tech businesses. I've successfully turned around a number of businesses. I've also been part of a management team that grew a startup into a double unicorn valued at 2.2 billion. So that was an exciting journey. Lots of lessons learned of scaling a business from 20 employees to over 600 in 3 different countries. I've successfully launched businesses in Europe and also the US. In terms of myself, I think I lead by example. I create great followership from my teams. I have a reputation for developing high-performing teams and developing talent. I think I'm generous with my time with my team. I'm a big believer on sort of being present and accessible to my team to support them to be successful. And I think probably something that defined me as an individual was I broke my back in 2000 and was paralyzed for a number of days in hospital, and that was a pretty scary experience. And I think really made me understand what was important in life, and that health is number one in your life. If you haven't got your health, you haven't got anything. And I think that's really helped me in terms of how I turn up at work. As in, people often say to me, "Wow, you're really calm. You don't get stressed, even though it's a really stressful situation." And I don't. I know what I can't impact and influence, so I don't get stressed about that. I just focus on what I can influence, and make sure I'm focused on doing the best I can there. But at the end of the day, as long as I'm healthy, life's good.
Well, it has to be said that it's quite an impressive pitch, that is, and then to top it all off with the inspiring story of how you've sort of come back from what is a bloody serious injury to top it all off is doff of the hat to you, to be fair, and yeah, as I said, it's quite an impactful first statement from yourself. So yeah, Steve, just looking at your sort of experiences then. So you yourself are clearly a successful C-suite leader. You've expanded organizations into many new and exciting territories. What do you think are some of the biggest challenges facing organizations when they're looking to venture into the great unknown?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest challenges, you don't know what you don't know. So when you go into a new market, it's new. You as an individual in a business may not have done that before. So that's one of the challenges. I think understanding that the local culture is important, but can also be challenging. And I think also you don't know, well, you need to understand, because you don't know typically the nuances of the local market and how you're going to get that product market fit. And so the approach I've taken that's been successful is it was all about preparation up front. So do your desktop research to start with. You want to understand the size of the market, who the competitors are, what their differentiation is, who's the market leader. If they got a defensible moat that's going to be challenging to overcome, like maybe it's a tech patent or a key contract in the market that's going to stop you kind of taking market share from them. I would be looking at the Trustpilot ratings and reviews of your competitors, just to see where are they experiencing challenges, or what's the sort of pain points in the market. You obviously, a challenge is understanding the regulatory environment and legal environment, and so really important that you get an advisor and a good legal team that can support you in that, so you don't get yourself into trouble. And that's the regulatory one's an interesting one. So ManyPets, for instance, we launched in Sweden. So at the time we were in the EU, so both UK, Sweden, both part of or subject to the European Insurance Directive. So you'd have thought the regulations are the same, but actually the way the Swedes interpreted the Insurance Directive was actually quite different to how the UK interpreted it. So there's lots of little nuances across everything, which actually all those little changes to systems and processes added up to quite a big change project compared to what we expected when we set out. So I think so there's a lot of work just to sort of understand the market from a desktop perspective. You can do a lot of research and say, yeah, this still feels like a good market to go into, but you've got to get out in that market and do the research. So so at ManyPets, for instance, when we went to the US, as my most recent example, is we went out and talked to people that had bought pet insurance, that hadn't bought pet insurance, to sort of understand, well, why did you buy it? What do you like about it? What do you like about your provider? Where are they falling short? If you didn't buy it, why didn't you buy it? Is that to do with your attitude to pet insurance, or was it just the product wasn't good enough? We talked to vets to understand their perspective, dealing with customers that have pet insurance or haven't pet insurance. So I think that was really important, or is that sort of customer engagement is really important, just to sort of hone your product, hone your customer journey. And then I would mock up your product, mock up a customer journey on a dummy app, go back out, get customers going through the process and giving you feedback, iterate, go back, test again, until you kind of feel like, yeah, it feels like we've got something that's going to work in the market, because it will be different. Pet insurance in the UK is different to pet insurance in Sweden to the US. I think then it's really important, you've got to have a really clear go-to-market strategy. So you've got to understand who your target demographic is, how are you going to target them, what your distribution channel is going to be, what's your brand messaging, what's your look and feel going to be that's going to appeal hopefully to your target demographic. I think we talked about supporting partners, and important to get there, but really important actually to try and find someone who's been there, done it, and got the t-shirt before, that can be your advisor. That's super helpful, just to avoid some of the pitfalls that they've maybe experienced before. That's probably money well spent. What else? Actually, probably one of the most important things is budget. Make sure you've got sufficient budget for this. When you do an international expansion, it's expensive. When you're doing a US expansion, it's super expensive. It's almost like take what you think it would cost in the UK, double it, and you probably even going to be short then going to the US. And then I think once you've launched, it's really important to be really monitoring the market and your customers. So getting that early customer feedback, being quick to react to any feedback if it's negative, as to how you can improve the journey, how you can improve your product. But I think it's also important just to recognize as a new entrant in the market, you're probably more nimble, more agile, more able to react to market conditions than some of the incumbents. So use that to your advantage. And I think the final thing that I would recommend doing is document your lessons learned. When we went to Sweden, I think we had 132 lessons learned. That definitely helped us when we went to the US, to say, well, this went really well, we need to do that again. This didn't work quite as well as we thought, we need to tweak that. And I think that's a really important sort of what's the word, process to go through.
Fair enough. I mean, yeah, I think everything that you said makes complete sense, and it's quite interesting that you say there about nuances within the market. I should imagine that there are particular nuances within customers' attitude towards products as well. I mean, just because in the UK we see, you know, our pets as our family, it doesn't necessarily that isn't necessarily going to translate dependent on what territory it is. You know, I suppose in a different culture, people will see not, and this doesn't just apply to pets, right? Some cultures may, you know, see their, and as an example, cars as their babies, right? And I know there are plenty of people that do that. Is that why, and part of why, the customer feedback and that initial sort of outreach and sort of voice of customer is so important, because clearly when designing a product and looking at the language of marketing and everything within the product to sell, you want to be honing in on those things that are important to that cultural value. Is that right, I suppose?
Yeah, 100%. I'll give you a very real example. So when we launched in Sweden, from day one, we only offered credit card as a method of payment. It turns out only 6% Swedes want to pay by credit card. They all want to pay by autogiro, which is like a direct debit. And so that was a miss on our part. That if we sort of researched it a little bit more, we would have probably understood that actually different payment methods. I mean, Germany's the same. Don't like to pay by credit card. In the US, very happy to pay by credit card. Very happy to give you their email address. Swedes don't like giving out their email address to you as part of the quote process, for instance. So again, this is all part of doing that rigorous customer engagement and focus groups up front, just to really understand the culture, the nuances, what do they like, what don't they like, yeah, you can learn a huge amount, and it's a lot cheaper and easier to fix those things before you've launched than post-launch and go, oh, I've got it wrong, I've now got to change everything, and I've got live customers on the platform, etc.
But and I suppose to that point, that's one of those things that you wouldn't, well, personally, I wouldn't necessarily, it wouldn't even cross my mind. I wouldn't even second question it, because I would just assume that that everybody will pay by credit card, debit card, and yeah, I suppose you don't know what you know until you know it, and that links in back into sort of what you mentioned there about keeping documented lessons learned. I can guarantee that's not something that you're going to be doing again, right? That's definitely something that has been lessons learned from that.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, like setting up bank accounts always takes ages in a new country. So that's number one thing, is make sure we're on top of that, because that can delay the project loads. But yeah, it's yeah, each country is slightly different. So Swedes, for instance, very insurance savvy, like very technical. You see chat on social media, and it's all very technical about the details of your policy and pricing. You go to the US, and it's all about, that's a lovely fluffy picture of a dog on your website. It's a lot less mature, and for pet insurance anyway, a lot less mature market. So you have to be a bit more technical in your literature in a mature market like Sweden. I mean, pet insurance was invented in Sweden, which is why it's so mature, and 90% of dog owners in Sweden have dog insurance. Whereas you look in the US, overall, it's only less than 3% of pets are insured. So it's a very different market, very different dynamics. Yeah, and you've got to understand that if you're going to pitch your product right, get your product and pricing right, and be successful.
I think it's quite interesting that overall the Swedes are very technical, because definitely before I got involved in insurance, I would have 100% have been the fluffy picture of the dog on the website kind of person, right? It would be that sort of eye candy that would lead me into something like that, rather than actually what it's providing cover for, and how to use it. But yeah, all makes a lot of sense, and all very important as well. But so when you're looking, at the expansion, how does that affect leaders and employees in the workplace? When you say, look, fantastic news, we're looking to expand, as an example, many pets into the US, does everybody see it as a great opportunity, or do many see it as a focus diversion? So therefore, the focus not necessarily being within their area, not necessarily being with their needs in mind, and how do you manage that challenge and the demands of bringing the whole organization on that journey?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a mix. I think certainly those that are involved in the project, it's exciting. They're learning about a new market. There's maybe some international travel. It's the kind of cutting edge of the company, so that's super exciting. But I think there are others that would like to be involved that, for whatever reason, are not. So they obviously can feel left out, and a bit disappointed. And so I think it's really important that you need to prevent any sort of resentment creeping in, or any silos between like the new country and the existing business, because that's not healthy. And I think a few things that, for instance, we did at Many Pets that I think worked well for us there One was making sure we celebrated success on the international expansions as a team. So as an example, when we launched in the US, we launched in the state of Illinois in March 21. Chicago's in Illinois. Chicago's famous for its deep pan pizza. So on the day we launched, we had about 400 people on Zoom because it was in lockdown. We'd sent everyone in the company pizza making mix and some drinks. We had a big celebration because we'd launched. We'd actually launched on time, the date we'd set 9 months earlier, which I was always been very proud of the team for achieving that.
Absolutely.
But we had a big party, and then everyone went off, made their pizzas, and sent photographs into their creations. And I think that really created an inclusive vibe and got everyone kind of excited about the US, even if they hadn't previously been involved. And I think also in the lead up to the launch, tried to engage as many people across the organization as possible. So we'd engage the customer service and the claims team to get their input as to how do we design the systems and processes for the US. We got some of those team members to train some of the initial staff in the US. So tried to make it as inclusive as possible. I think one of the key things, key learnings and key things is communication. You've really got to communication, especially as you're scaling the business, it's super key. It becomes more and more important, especially during COVID, and now everyone's sort of like semi-remote. But you need to make sure everyone knows what's going on, as well as obviously champion the successes, but also talk about some of the challenges. And I think opening up to some people and saying, hey, we've got this challenge, anyone got any ideas how we can solve it, is another good way of getting people feeling like they're involved in the project. And I think that worked well and helped everyone sort of be part of that journey we were going on as an organization. You mentioned leadership. I think for me, one of the key things the leaders need to focus on is prioritization. When you launch in a new country, it's like, let's make sure there's very clear prioritization of where the new country fits in terms of other initiatives. Make sure you're managing the dependencies between these different projects, because you don't want to kind of be in a situation where you're in a new country, you've leased an office, you've hired a load of people, only to find out the tech and product team were not aligned with the dates and they're delivering 6 months later. So I think leadership's got a part to play in making sure prioritization is clear, everyone knows how important and what the priority is of the new country launch. And also, once you've launched in the new country, you've then got 2 countries, 2 teams that have got growth targets that they want to hit, and they might both be relying on a central product on tech team or some central functions. So how are you going to prioritize who gets the resources and when? And so I think that's an important part that leadership have to play to make sure everyone is aligned and clear on the relative priorities and how things are going to pan out. Otherwise, you can get teams getting demoralized, and that's never a good place to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as soon as you get demoralization, I suppose there's a sort of kick back to the expansion anyway, right? It's sort of, it was much better before we started expanding and I could get the resource that I needed when I needed it. All of the focus is over there and I'm not getting what I need, or da 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 da. Whereas if you manage one, expectations, and two, I suppose, be inclusive in the strategy meetings to say that this is what we're doing, this is how this department's going to come along on the with us, and yes, this is what you need, etc., etc. I think it's all about probably leadership and management of the expansion from the top down, really, to make sure that everybody is well clued up on exactly what's happening, why it's happening, etc., etc. And I think that alleviates a lot of the question marks and the disgruntledness, if that is a word, of certain leaders that may feel that they might have skill gaps or they need to achieve this. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And again, sorry, yeah, no, carry on, Steve.
No, so one thing I think I forgot to mention earlier that I've always found really, really important for setting the whole international expansion up for success is at the kickoff meeting. So you have the first meeting and say, we've got board approval, we're doing this. Invite all the stakeholders. And I've got challenged in the past. It's like, wow, you got 30 people in a room for 2 hours, 2.5 hours. Is that a really good use of time? I'm like, it absolutely is. So even if they might be not involved in the project for 9 months, at least they know, why are we doing it? What are we doing? Why, like what's the rough timeline? And they can start to think about what their part is to play in the whole plan, and that they know that at some point they will be engaged, because that just gets everyone on the same page. And I think that's really important. If you don't have that initial kickoff meeting with all the key stakeholders and people that are going to have a part to play or be impacted by the project, I think you're missing a trick. It's the best use of 2 hours, 3 hours, however long that kickoff meeting takes, just to get everyone aligned.
And I think if everybody's in on the meeting, you know, and everybody's got the clear picture, it stops rumors flying, right? Because there can always be rumors, and if it's cloak and dagger and smoke and mirrors and people aren't 100% sure on exactly what's happening, like I mentioned there, people just assume it's cloak and dagger. People get nervous. People think, oh, they're not including us. Maybe this means that they're looking to either sell their UK buck, or, you know, oh, this might happen, that might happen. Whereas if everybody's in the picture, rumors can't really fly because everybody was in the room at the same time to say, well, actually, no, that's not what it meant at all. This is how it's happening. So yeah, surely that is the most important 2 hours of the project, is to get everybody involved and to kick it off, and the ship running in the right direction, right, and everybody pulling together to get to the final destination, so to speak. So yeah.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. It is like you don't want that cloak and dagger, because people always, for whatever people, a lot of people always think of the negative. Oh, they haven't told me, so it must be bad. And it's like, and sometimes it can be an oversight, but like, let's be deliberate about it. Let's make sure we're really open and transparent. Like they say, is what's going well, what's not going well, what we're doing. I'm a big firm believer of being open and transparent. I think your team appreciate that, and if they know where they stand and what's going on.
So with all of that, because clearly we've already gone through you know, a fair amount there. If you could just give one piece of advice to an organization who's looking or wanted to expand, what would the singular piece of advice be, if there was only one bit of advice that you could give?
If there was one bit of advice, it would probably be, don't underestimate the impact of the local culture. Every country's different, and just kind of pitching up, translating your website into the local language, or changing S's for Z's in the US, that's not going to cut it, in my view. You've got to go in. Like, I think a lot of people in local countries would prefer to buy from a local supplier than someone international that they've never heard of, that they're like, what, something goes wrong, how am I going to get hold of them? So I think you've got to understand the local culture, develop your products and services and your website, so you come across as a local supplier who's developed something specifically tailored to that local market. And I think you'll have a lot more success doing that than if you, for instance, I don't know, went to Sweden, just translated from, actually some people just go to Sweden with their English website because the Swedes speak English so well. But I just think that's, if you really want to be a market leader, that's not going to cut it.
And I think that makes a lot of sense. Like you said, if you're from a country in this and a new organization comes from a foreign land and you've never heard of them, I mean, especially if you literally only change your well, in the Sweden fact that you mentioned there, that the certain organizations have just put their English text on the website, it's probably not going to give the best impression, is it? And but further than that, you know, definitely nuances within any marketplace can really leverage more business, can't it? It can be little simple things, but without doing the due diligence and looking at those nuances, you wouldn't know, right? So I get where you're coming from. It could be a complete game changer, really.
Yeah.
So in terms of you know, as you look at the insurance market at the moment, now I know this will be different, but from product line and to product line and product to product. But where do you see the biggest opportunities coming from in insurance in terms of the great unknown in the world? Where do you see the biggest up and coming sort of opportunities coming from?
Yeah, I still think the US is a really big opportunity. Like, I mean, it is like 50 countries because it's 50 states, with 50 regulators, so that could be a challenge. But you look at California, the economy in California is larger than a lot of European countries, and also the English speaking, which makes it a lot easier. Going to Sweden, having a Swedish website and trying to understand, is our tone of voice right when you don't speak the language, is challenging. So I think there's definitely an opportunity there, and I think there's some opportunities in the admitted market for new entrants. So you have to file your rates and forms or your pricing and policy wordings with the regulators. once you file them, they become publicly available. So this secret source a lot of insurers have in the UK, that's their pricing, it's all publicly available in the US. So as a new entrant, you can look at all your competitors' pricing, their policy wordings, which can really help you sort of understand the market. But you can also do what's called a Me Too filing, where literally you can go to the regulator and say, I want to copy Many Pets' policy wording and pricing. I want to do these few deviations, and you can literally just copy your competitor. It's called a Me Too filing. So it really, so it's quick to dip your toe in the market and sort of get into the market. But that's a kind of double-edged sword, because that means that if you have a differentiated product or pricing, anyone could copy it quite easily. So interestingly, I think for me, the US it's harder to differentiate in product and pricing. It needs to be a lot more on the customer experience. And actually which kind of makes sense anyway, because when you're insurance, the rubber hits the road when you make a claim. And so the customer experience has got to be great. And I actually think my personal view is that the sort of customer service excellence model in the UK is a bit more mature than in the US. And so I think there's a good opportunity for UK companies to go over there and outperform from a customer experience perspective than a lot of US competitors. But yeah, so there's definitely some advantages to getting into the market, but there is a downside. 50 regulators, 50 different rules that are all slightly nuanced, so you have to give different notice of renewals, different cancellation processes in each state, so you need to be all on top of that. But I still think US is a good opportunity. It's hard, it's difficult, it's expensive. You've got to be really careful. Like one thing I would always make sure I do, one of my big lessons learned in the US is really have someone monitoring all of your competitors' pricing, because they're filing them and you can see when they filed and what they're filing. It just gives you a little bit of an indication what's happening in the market as your book's developing and your loss ratio is developing. If you suddenly see like all your competitors are filing like 30% increases in California, there's probably something going on in California, and if you're not looking to do the same, you're going to get caught out. So certainly I think there's things you can do as you're in the early stages with a developing book of business that you can be doing just to try and stop yourself getting into issues.
Yeah, and I suppose, like anything, there's going to be a downside to any territory that you go into. It's not all a bed of roses, because I should imagine if it was, it wouldn't be everybody that would be there already, right? If there was not absolutely going to be no downside. But clearly the US is that big. If you can tackle that beast and you can get that market share, I mean, it completely dwarfs the UK, doesn't it? So that makes a lot of sense as well. So yeah, thanks for that. Now I just wanted to come on more about yourself really, and speak a little bit in terms of, clearly you're a successful C-suite leader. So I'll just come out with a question. So when you look back at your career, who do you have most to thank for some advice that you'd been given, mentorship or guidance, that sort of really helped you?
I would probably say one of the biggest impactful people on me was a chap called Ralph McDonald. I'd become CEO of a tech business in Canada. It had financial issues. We just breached a banking covenant, and the bank sent Ralph in to sort of oversee the turnaround and sort of protect the bank's interests. But I found Ralph was, although he was representing the bank, was really supportive. He gave lots of mentorship and guidance to me, and really gave me the courage to make some pretty big changes to the business, totally restructure the business, downsized or right-sized the business, sort of, which meant 75 people unfortunately were made redundant, which is always tough. But he was really supportive, and there's always a quote I always remember of him, because unfortunately, sadly, he passed away last year. Was he said, was it anyone can sail a ship in calm seas? It's the test of a true captain who can navigate stormy waters, and we were certainly in stormy waters, but we managed to navigate through. And yeah, I had a lot to thank Ralph for in terms of his support at a difficult time. It was the first big turnaround I'd done, and he was really supportive and became a good friend. Post that engagement, we always kept in touch.
Well, then, no, it's good, and the quote that you've mentioned there is 100% correct, right? And I think it can often be it is the difference between success and failure a lot of the times. It is how you can navigate when the chips are down, right? It's easier to make hay whilst in the sun than to turn something around, right? And definitely in the insurance market over the last sort of 12 months, the waters have been particularly choppy. And then what I think that you'll see is at the back end of that is those that have navigated those waters most effectively and the best that they can will probably and likely come out the other side ahead of competition, right? So it's very relevant in today as well. So yeah.
Yeah, I think adversity always generates opportunity, and if you do a better job than your competitors, maybe they go out of business or just are really challenging, have to really scale back their aspirations. But if you can navigate your way through that effectively, yeah, you've got to be in a good position compared in the market compared to the competition.
And just finally then, so what advice would you give somebody who wanted to thrive at a C-suite level? What or a board appointment, what would be the sort of advice that you could pass on to somebody that wanted to emulate or get to where you are, I suppose?
I would say I would be curious, ask lots of questions. I'm always a big fan of doing skip level meetings so you really understand what's happening in your organization. I think you need to really understand the pain point and the problem you're trying to solve in the market, and make sure it's the most important pain point you're trying to solve in the market. I think you need to always try and think about creating that defensible moat that makes you market leader and makes it really difficult for someone to come away and take market share from you. Actually, I think one of the biggest things I would say is make sure you find time for that strategic thinking. It's always really easy to get sucked into the day-to-day tactical and operational issues and not think strategically. And your role is to be strategic and think about the future and where the company's going. And something that I've done for the last 10 plus years is I have no meeting Tuesdays or Wednesdays. So one day a week, I have no meetings. That's my time to get my head down, do my thinking, do my strategic thinking. My teams love it as well because that gives them a day where they don't have meetings and can just get stuff done rather than this. We seem to be a culture these days of too many meetings, and it's just really hard to switch a gear from meeting to thinking. And I think the last bit of advice I would give is sort of don't be afraid to change course if you've got a decision wrong, and don't be afraid to sort of own up and say, yeah, that decision was less than optimal, or I got it wrong. Because I think it's important to get back on course as soon as possible, and I think your team will appreciate you being open and sort of saying, yeah, hands up, I got that one wrong for whatever reason. And it may just be new data came along that you didn't have at the time, but yeah, I think it's important to come clean if you haven't got it quite right. And actually, last point I'll say is really make sure you're always monitoring the competition. You don't want to get caught standing still when your competitors make a move. So really, yeah, don't rest on your laurels if you're in a good position in the market. Always be looking at what everyone else is doing, especially new entrants that might come in with some big backing, new ideas. So you've got to be alert to what's going on in your environment, and never take for granted your position in the market.
Well, I mean, I think that's great advice, you know, in terms of the strategic thinking. If you keep on going in one direction and you don't take a step back and a holistic approach to think, okay, well, what can we be doing? You know, it's almost like that sharpening the sword. You know, you need to be more strategic to be able to make sure that you are definitely going in the right direction. And second to that, look, everybody makes mistakes. It's just a fact, right? It's human nature, and you've got the difference between highly successful people is the bravery, I suppose, to try new things, to try to be different, to try and look, it doesn't always work. But like you said, I think it's having that realization of, okay, this isn't working how we wanted it to. You know, hands up, that's fine. It's how you move forward. It's not necessarily focusing on the negative, it's focusing on the positive. And that links well with the strategic thinking, right? If you make the decision to go down a direction and you just carry on plowing through that direction and you don't take that holistic approach and step back and look strategically at it, the longer it is before you realize that it's not actually working, the decision that you've made, and the quicker that you can get back to the correct direction or doing something different. But without the bravery to try and change direction, nobody goes anywhere fast, right? So it's that fine line. But I completely agree with what you're saying there, to be honest with you. So yeah, I mean, we've dug through an awful lot there, Steve, but I really appreciate your time. It's been really good hearing about, your sort of experiences in expansion to different territories, and hopefully the viewers find it, quite insightful, and you may have given them something that they may not have thought about, when they're looking to move forward into different territories, and it could make a big difference to those people. So I can't thank you enough for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure, Steve.
Well, thank you for having me, John. And if any viewers do want to reach out with any questions, I'm very, very happy to have a conversation. I reached out to lots of people in my early days of doing international expansion, getting advice. So I feel like it's only right that I'm giving some of that experience back to the next generation that are coming through and trying to tackle these big, hairy, audacious projects, which are international expansions.
Well, I'll sort of tag you in on the on the podcast as well, so that if anybody is interested in reaching out to Steve, there'll be a link there that will go through to your LinkedIn page. So yeah, it's very nice of you to offer that, and I really appreciate your time today, Steve. It's been fantastic. So thank you very much, and I'm sure that we'll speak again soon enough. And to everybody else watching, until the next episode and update, all the best.